Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Koble. I teach at Audubon K through 8, 7th and 8th grade history in San Diego Unified School District, and this is a presentation based on standards-based grading for the micro-credential class. So today we're gonna kind of learn a little bit about what standards-based grading is, more importantly what it's not, and why it grades more accurately than traditional grades. So to start off, just with some problems with the current grading system we have, the first biggest one is it gives an average grade for a semester. So basically it takes the beginning of the semester, middle of the semester, and a semester, it condenses it all into one average and says, for this semester, here is how you did. Which on its surface, doesn't sound like a bad idea. But working in like in Morse clusters, you see different things. So as an example, I have a kid who has a baby brother at home. In the beginning of the semester, they were during normal times, this is during the pandemic, but they're coming to school, they're doing great, they're doing an awesome job, a student, and then they're forced to take care of their baby brother at home. They stop coming to school, so they're not turning in anything, not turning any homework, any projects, any assignments. So they have an F in the class. However, if they came in and just took all the assessments, they would at least be, have a B or an A. So it takes students who have a very rough part of the year or rough part of the semester due to life circumstances, or maybe they just didn't, get their act together. And it punishes them for that time period. And it disincentivizes them from catching up, and it disincentivizes them from doing well later in the point, because I'll have 7th graders tell me, well, what's the point of working now if I already have an F? So that's the first kind of problem, is the average grade phenomenon. The second part is compliance grades. So this is the kid that knows 50% of the content but has an 85%. Full disclosure, this was me in high school chemistry. I didn't know the content that well, I'll be real. You have a kid knows, gets a D on the test, F on the test, maybe a C, but they still have a B in the class because they do all the homework and they do all the projects, and their attendance and participation is really good. So yes, they're awesome. They have a lot of grit. They are doing everything the right way. They're respectful. They're doing school the right way. They're working hard, but at the same time, they don't know the content, and that is called compliance grading. So there's a big issue of, well, we want kids to work hard. We want kids to do homework. We want kids to learn. But it comes down to, what are grades measuring? Now, if your grade measures overall, work ethic and all that, cool, good. They should have a B, but that's not what grades are for. Grades are for measuring knowledge of the content. Citizenship is for measuring work ethic, grit, and all that, which is good. We want to promote that. The issue, though, is we don't have a good way to promote citizenship and make kids and parents and colleges care about citizenship in a meaningful way. So we lump it in with grades. So that compliance grading is an issue all on its own. There'll be a whole other presentation about that and those issues. The third one's equity. We have kids that don't have computer access. We have kids that have a really bad home life. We know this. These kids can't do homework as reliably. They can't have as much access to work on projects and tests online. They don't have as much access. They don't have access to tutors. Creates kind of an uneven playing field. And yes, there are things we are doing already to even that, there are things they can do, like go to the library, but it puts extra onus on them that other more well-off kids that have a better hand don't have to deal with. So the issue of equity and turning things in on time, and the traditional kind of things like, oh, how many times have you had a kid say, oh, I left my history textbook at dad's house or mom's house? So this is, and they can't do their homework and their grade suffers, even though they know all the content. So that's kind of the issue, is what if you have like this kid, this imaginary kid knows all the content, but their life circumstances don't allow them to do as well as a kid that doesn't know the content, but can do all of the things like homework and other stuff, no problem. The last one is inflexible due dates and semester killers. These are more kind of based on the individual teacher, if I'm being honest, and I've done these too. Some people are very inflexible with their due dates, which gives kids, like I said, with harder life circumstances, more difficulty, even if they know the content. And I'm going to be saying even if they know the content quite a bit today. extra problems. The semester killer one, these are the assignments. That's like, this is 50% of your overall grade. And, you know, mom dies a week before the project's due. This obviously is something that most teachers already kind of work around, and most teachers are very willing to work with and cooperate on. So this one's probably a different issue. I myself give a semester project traditionally that doesn't destroy their grade if they don't do a good job, but I has that end of the year assessment that incorporates all these skills that you've worked on. But these are kind of the four kind of things with the grading system that they were looking at changing. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about what standards-based grading is not. Okay, cool. That's the last animation I have. Is not. So if you go on a Facebook article and you see all these people that don't know anything about education talking about education, you'll see these common misconceptions. So you'll see a lot of, oh, they're lowering the bar to get more students to graduate. If anything, it's the opposite. But what this is suggesting is, well, high school graduation rates need to look good. It doesn't look good to have a 40% F rate, so they're going to lower the bar so more kids pass. And that's standards-based grading. They'll see, oh, you're getting rid of homework. Oh, way to lower the bar. And it's actually, you'll see that it's the opposite. The other comment is, so I guess everything's credit or no credit now. And like I said, not the case. Standards-based is not credit or no credit. It's based on the standards. And the last one's, I guess, every child passes now. Once again, very similar to lowering the bar. It's a common misconception. It's not the case. So we know what standards-based grading isn't. What is it? Ultimately, standards-based grading is seeking an accurate measurement of student ability or skill. That is what they're looking for, an accurate measurement of student content, knowledge, skill, in case of like performing arts or fine arts, or ability or knowledge or whatever you're analyzing. That is the core of what you are grading. That is their academic grade. And also, you take student ability and you align it among measurable standards. So can they introduce a topic sentence that associates with grade level and it's accurate? For math, can they multiply, do two-step equations with I'm not a math teacher, but there's all these different standards that you have to abide by, and you're basically measuring, can students do this? They're also a way to track student skill over the course of the semester. So for example, if you have if I do history, there's a lot of writing. If we're doing a lot of citing evidence and a lot of reasoning, those are usually the two that we have to focus on the most. I'm tracking over the course of the semester. Okay, when I have both 7th and 8th grade, I have them for both years. I'll say, okay, in 7th grade, can you pick one good piece of evidence? And then, 6 weeks later on the next after the progress notice, okay, can you cite and introduce one piece of evidence correctly that fits your paragraph? Good. And then the next 6 weeks, it's okay, well, can you pick a piece of evidence can you cite it? Can you introduce it? And can you explain a little bit about it to the reader before you give it? So you're adding a next step kind of every time throughout the year. These are things you revisit a lot. And you can measure their progress off of their measurable student skills and standards. So, for reasoning, it might be, you start off with one sentence and then, okay, explain it in 2 sentences. And then can you use domain-specific vocabulary in your explanation? And you keep kind of adding on and building the skill as you go, according to state standards. As far as some strengths of standards-based grading, the biggest one is you assess kids on content, not compliance. You assess kids on their ability and their content knowledge, which is what an academic grade really is. The other one is it allows flexibility to students who score poorly throughout the year. So for an example, if by the end of the year, they need to hit X standard, and and that kid maybe wasn't coming to school at all for the first 6 weeks, or for where their attendance was spotty or sleeping in class or whatever it was. But they were still able to do it. They're not stuck in this hole of, oh, well, I got an F the first 8 weeks, so why try now? It kind of gets rid of that hole. It gives them chances to reevaluate and reassess where that student is. You also kind of create consistency across the board. And what I mean by that is you are, how do I phrase this for different subjects? When you create consistency across the board, you're saying, all right, well, for English learners, yes, this is good for them, but it's still not approaching the standard. Or if you have an accelerated student, they start off at a 3, which is standard or above, you're seeing, okay, well, can they get it to a 4? And this rubric you create can accommodate all of those. So let's say your English learner does jump up to a 3 later on. You can see that, you can track that individual progress, and you can also see whole group data. You can see how all English learners are doing compared to each other. Overall, standards-based is really meant for summative assessments, big writing samples. If you ask your English teachers at your school, you'll see these gigantic chart rubrics about all the different types of language, and you can see that it's based on standards. So it's really for bigger summative assessments that it's strongest with. As far as avoiding the pitfalls of traditional grading, I made a slide on this. Look at that. I did that already. So here is how I took a kind of 8th grade test, an essay-based summative assessment, and we made it based on standards. So in this case, a 4 is far above standards, a 3 meets the standards, a 2 is approaching the standards, and a 1 is far below standards. 0 would be no attempt. I know in this example, I do have no evidence and is used, evidence is not cited, no elaboration, all that. I do have that as a 1. I would actually put those as 0s. And instead, I would put maybe, main claim is difficult to find, or main claim is not clear, or main claim is not, topic sense, or whatever kind of feedback you would have that is not like no attempt. So my 1 column is not accurate. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. So a 4 is obviously far above standards. That would be really strong, you choose really strong evidence. You choose your elaborations very strong and that kind of thing. But overall, a 3 is also good. A 3 is also what students want to get to. That is what kind of you're expecting as like an A. Maybe like a low A if you're correlating this to the traditional grade system. So really anything from 3 to 4 would be around an A in my mind, as far as standards-based grading. Hey, this is like mastery of the content and that kind of thing. And then they can track between the difference between 3s and 4s. So this is not like a 4 is 100%. Well, it is. A 3 is an 85%. A 2 is a 70%, a 1's a 60%, and then 0 would be 0. It doesn't work like that. 3 is still, it's above, it meets the standards. That would probably be an A. It could be a low A if you're correlating it correctly, but that would be the idea. So as far as the difficulties go of standards-based grading, the first one's creating rubrics that are clear and accessible to students. This one, if a student sees evidence properly cited using genre, title, author, date, they know what to look for. They know to look for genre, title, author, and date. They know to include that. However, if some rubrics, especially the ones according to state standards, are very difficult to understand even for teachers. And they're very, I'll say, qualitative. So student strongly uses argumentative tones of writing, and they're very long and flowy standards, and they're very long, multiple pages. If you give a kid a multiple page rubric, they ain't looking at it. If you give a kid, kids struggle to look at this rubric. So if you're giving them a very long rubric with a lot of teacher language, education language, educators aren't going to look at it, and B, students aren't going to look at it, which is the most important part. So the first hardest part about the standards-based grading is making rubrics clear and accessible to students. 2 is this paradigm shift in student-parent backlash. So if we start to measure kids not based on homework, not based on, attendance, participation, all that kind of stuff, we base it purely off content knowledge and skill knowledge, you're going to see a lot of kids score a lot worse. You're going to see a lot of kids who, yes, they do all the homework, yes, they try really hard, they, ask for help and all that, but at the end of the day, they know it to maybe a 75% extent, they're still going to have a C, even though they worked really hard, and or worse, a D or an F, because the language gaps are in that kind of case. And you're going to see a lot of students and parents get really upset, because when they were kids, that's how they did it, and they got an A and B based off doing homework and participation and all of that. So college admission would be another huge aspect of kids that normally would get a B in a class by doing homework and all that. Well, now they're getting Ds. So that's kind of the big, I think it's raising the bar, not lowering it. You're really basing their grade on their content knowledge. And that is going to be a huge shock to the kids who normally are seen as B students in some subjects, and they're getting Ds. So that was going to be a very big paradigm shift that society is going to have to go through if we go to standards-based grading. The third is readapting curriculum to consistently test standards. Making a new standards-based grading rubric and assessment takes a lot of time. I think, when you have teachers that have historically used a summative for a good amount of time and you're asking them to completely revamp everything, you're going to meet a lot of resistance, and it's going to take a lot of time to readapt all this curriculum to consistently test certain standards. So there are certain logistic pitfalls of standards-based grading, which leads me to a different alternative. As great as standards-based grading is, as accurate as it is, these are pretty strong, pretty big pitfalls in my opinion. But so I did some research, and I'm a middle school teacher. So some of these standards-based grading stuff really works great at the high school level, but for middle schoolers, it's really hard for them to put together. So I did some research and found something that is based off standards-based grading. It's a twist on standards-based grading, and it is called mastery-based grading. And this is kind of what I want to advocate for. So as far as what it is you are only grading assessments. This is the same idea behind standards-based grading. You are only grading the core, content knowledge. You're taking all the compliance out. So you're only grading the assessments on either the unit or the subunit. The lesson segment, so you can have a formative assessment. You can grade that. So assessments only have 2 grades: mastery or work in progress. You can also add a nothing if they just don't do it at all. But you either score mastery or work in progress in that kind of idea. So as far as what is mastery, well, it depends on the assignment. But when you think about mastery and types of mastery, like mastery-based, I guess, things we have today, is if your boss asks you, hey, I need this spreadsheet on, X, Y, and Z done within the week, they're not going to go to you and say, oh, that presentation you gave was a C, that was all right. They're not going to give you a letter grade. They're going to say, hey, good, it needs what I needed you to do, or you clearly know your topic, or they'll say that was excellent. That was the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. This is also the same idea behind driving tests, right? You don't get a letter grade on your driving test. You do it until you achieve a certain threshold that the state deems you acceptable to drive. And that's kind of the same idea behind mastery tasks, As far as what is mastery, well, that depends on the assessment. That depends what you want them to know and what the benchmark is for you believe some kind of skill or content to be mastered. Whether that is a 7-page essay, no, I wouldn't give that. But if it's a 7-page essay for you, it's a 7-page essay with, you have your length, you have your, 5 pieces of evidence, and we already embed these in our assignments anyway. For math, maybe, if you're doing 4th grade math or 3rd grade math, 85% accuracy on their times tables. You might consider mastered. It depends on what it is. The other kind of principle behind mastery-based grading is, once again, there's flexible due dates similar to standards-based. You are grading them based on, do they know the content, and do they have they shown the ability that to reliably master it? Have they shown the ability to reliably understand it? That is what mastery-based grading is. So I know a lot of teachers freak out and say, well, I don't want to get a billion things on the last day before the semester ends. True. I empathize with that. I agree. What I have seen is teachers give hard due dates at some points throughout the year. So maybe at the 6-week mark, 12-week mark, 18-week mark, whatever it is. But at the core, you really want to see if students understand the material. That's the core behind, I don't care when they learn it. I care that they learn it. That kind of idea. So some overall pros and cons of mastery-based is the pros, it embeds a growth mindset. If you get a work in progress, that is because it is in progress. You can go back and change it. If a kid turns in a poster and it is missing 4 of the components for mastery, they can go back and fix it and explain and fix their mistakes. And they can keep doing that until they reach mastery. When you take a driving test, they don't say, all right, well, we're going to take your original score and cut it in half. And then when you retake it, we'll take your retake and cut the success of that in half and then add on those points. No, it's just, do you know it or not? Again, you can use, it's a lot easier to adapt this to formative assessments that are a lot smaller or larger summative assessments. You can make your criteria easier to understand, as opposed to all the flowy language of all the state standards. Yes, you use the state standards when you're making your assessments, just like any other test that you already do in the current system. Sorry. But this is really tailored more toward the students. And then you kind of set a clear standard. Kids know what they need in their mastery task in order to hit mastery. They know what to expect. As far as the cons, if you have too few mastery tasks, they will impact the grade book a lot harder than if they miss one thing. So, if you only have 8 mastery tasks for a whole semester and they miss one of them, 7 out of 8 is going to hurt a lot. So too few of them will impact the grade book to an extent. Also, the other challenge is making mastery tasks equitable in our current system of grading, where we have A, B, C, D, F at 90, 80, 70, 60, and 50%. So making mastery tasks, maybe some of them are worth different points. So for example, you could have all the mastery tasks be equal. Let's say you have 15 mastery tasks in a semester, and at the end of the year, you say, all right, if you got 13 to 15 masteries, that's an A. If you got 11 to 12, it's a B. 9 to 10 is a C. 8's a D, and 7 or less is an F. So you can deem all mastery tasks equal in how much they impact their grade. Or you can have different point values. So if you have let's say you have one mastery task that took a lot of time, or was was like much more challenging and much more, you had to put a lot more work into. You could maybe make that one 30 points in your grade book and the other one's 15. You can change the point values of these up and down depending on your opinion, how difficult they were, how much they showed, did they show mastery in them, were they a lot more work, that kind of thing. You can be a little more flexible with it. Personally, what I do is, as we get closer to the end of the semester, I inflate the point totals so that kids who did a bad job at the beginning of the semester can make up their grade and have it bounce back a little bit more. So that's kind of how I navigate the problem of an average grade. So that's one idea. The other thing is IEPs. I know there are certain legal standards and legal requirements that traditionally, we know how to traditionally work with those requirements in the current system, in a mastery-based system. Honestly, all you have to do is just change the standards for mastery, or do what other people, or just give them more scaffolds to reach mastery. There's many different ways depending on the IEP, depending on the student, depending on the mastery task, whatever it is. But that's just something to think about when you're navigating this. As far as some examples of what mastery grading looks like, here's that exact same rubric that we had for standards-based grading, but it's changed a little bit. So you can see that mastery, main claim clearly states how slavery was justified economically and politically. This is by Southerners, so the student, is not justifying anything, with two reasons. So the student knows what they need to do to hit mastery. If their claim doesn't explain these things, you can write on the rubric, claim isn't clear, and circle it, and say, hey, you need to fix this. What I would do is say you have to have all 5 pieces of your mini essay hit mastery for you to get a mastery score. I'm not going to take, main claim's great, citation's great, your evidence, you don't have evidence, you have, your elaboration needs some improvement, and there's a lot of, but you have no writing mistakes and an average amount. I'm not going to do that. It's purely all subjects need to be mastered. So that would be how I would grade mastery tasks, using this kind of idea of it's mastered or it's not mastered. You need to fix it and give it back to me. And then also, I like a no evidence column. Some people just have mastery and work in progress. I think a no, you didn't do it at all thing is necessary for me. When I put these into the grade book, I have either 0%, like if they didn't do it at all, 50% if it's a work in progress, and 100% if it's mastery. So I've been doing this with distance learning for this year across my 7th and 8th grade classes. I want to show you some examples of what mastery tasks look like. So as far as the 3 steps, and they're, like I said, these are different for every single assignment. Some assignments work really well with these 3 steps of a self-paced classroom. Some I'm going to run completely differently when we go back to school. But from what I noticed, students learn material. This could be through a reading you do as a class. This could be through a presentation, a lecture, whatever you need to do. The first thing is students learn the material. Next, you give students some sort of practice in using that skill. And the third step is students are assessed on that content or skill. So this works with some assignments. Others, I might condense 1 and 2 into one thing, and then I still assess them based on mastery, based on that content. So these 3 steps, you don't have to stick to them entirely, but these are kind of the idea behind a self-paced classroom. I've been working with them in distance learning, but that is kind of the idea behind you can condense 1 and 2 together, but you are still assessing them on their skill or content knowledge. So as far as some examples go, here's just a quick thing I put together. Students do a guided reading, or maybe like a 10-minute YouTube lecture, take notes or whatever it is. Students do a gallery walk, learning more about that topic in depth. And then students do a matching activity as their mastery task. Mastery tasks are not limited to just writing essays or writing paragraphs or hitting 85% on your times tables. They can be tons of different things. Mastery can be seen in a variety of ways. And that's the next part we're going to look at, is a different representation of assignments. So as far as some examples of this, I'm going to show some traditional assessments first, so that I've actually gave to kids this semester. So the first one is a writing heavy one. So I said for the mastery task, you'll compare these stories of Josiah and Diego and the reasons they came to America. So we had a little short lecture about what indentured servant was. They read a couple stories with some questions to guide them, and then they're using those stories to show their mastery. So there's I gave them 3 components. The first part is a Venn diagram, and I said to have a mastery. I should change to mastery. For mastery, you need 5 similarities and 5 differences. So when I go to here, I would have to see 5 similarities and 5 differences. So that would be the first step of, one of the things I look at for mastery. The next one might be comparing and contrasting. So the guidelines I have for those are, 2 pieces of evidence, and you need to expand on your evidence. when I had the 7th graders, we called it Black Death reasoning. So these are the these are the kind of baselines of content mastery based on the standards I know we're going to hit at the end of the year for writing. So that's kind of the idea behind that. Another example would be on a different kind of test. I believe I showed this one actually. Yes, this is the one I showed. So you break down the different components and say, hey, you mastered putting together a main claim. Great job. You mastered, selecting good evidence, but you did not master introducing it correctly. You are missing entire sections of author, date, et cetera, et cetera. You need to go back and fix it. Here's a sentence frame. So that kind of idea behind grit, and you can always improve and get to mastery. So that's another way. That's another way it might look. For multiple choice, you can do mastery with multiple choice and say, hey, you need 15 out of 20 correct to hit mastery. That's totally fine too. You make that standard for mastery. As far as other forms of assessment, it still works well, if not better. I might use standards-based grading for traditional assessments like this that are bigger or like unit end. I might use a standards-based rubric, and everything else might be mastery, or I might try to keep it consistent. But as far as other things where maybe you give them a sorting activity and a writing activity, you have mastery criteria for each. So I gave them a matching activity for loyalists and patriots, where they had to move and sort the text boxes based on if a loyalist would have said it, or a patriot would have said it. And they have to move the text box around. So my criteria for mastery would be, 10 out of 13 of those are correctly sorted. The second part of this is writing a paragraph about which they would have been on. Same kind of thing, they have criteria for their paragraph as well. 5 sentences, explain why, which is the key part I highlighted, reference one of the causes of the revolution. So you give them certain criteria they need to hit to show that they've mastered the standard or mastered the concept you want them to master. As far as some quick other ones, I do have another writing one, but I want to show a more hands-on one in a map. Well, I'll show a couple more. As far as another, well, never mind, not that one. As far as a map assignment, when I gave my 7th graders, I had them hand draw a map, and I said, okay, for mastery, you need all 3 continents I'm giving you labeled correctly. I gave you 18 countries to label. You need 13 labeled correctly. I gave you 10 cities. You need 7 labeled correctly. I gave you some other content. You need 4 labeled correctly. You set the standards based on what you think is mastered, depending on the content. So that's kind of the idea behind mastery-based grading. It's a variation of standards-based grading. I use it because I teach middle school, and if I pull out these big rubrics, it's just going to get more confusing. Kids like the idea behind mastery missions or mastery tasks. It's easy to go to Google Classroom and be like, oh, I've done 10 out of 12. Here are the 2 that I didn't do. It's a lot, it's easier for them to compartmentalize. It's a more middle school friendly version of standards-based grading. So that's kind of what I advocate for. So once again, I hope this helped really, clear the difference between maybe problems we have in our current grading system, what standards-based grading is not, at its core, what it is with 4, 3, 2, 1 in terms of approaching standards, that is this rubric, and also a variation of it that I think works for middle school, which would be mastery-based grading. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions or you'd like to contact me or know more about it or anything like that, I'm going to wait for my Spotify menu to go away before I type it in. You can always reach me at dkoble@sandy.net. Email me, put mastery-based grading question in the subject. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, as long as I work in Sandy Unified. So feel free to email me here if you have any questions. And hopefully you have a great rest of your day.